Hello and welcome aboard, everybody. In today's video, I'm joined again by International Master Georgi Orlov, and today he's picked out a couple more games for us to take a look at. You can basically think of this as a free lesson from a fantastic coach. Without further ado, let's go ahead and give him the floor and see what he's got to show us. All right.
Well, good evening, everybody. So we're going to continue today with our pawn break lesson. Now, what we try to review today is a little different from the previous lesson. The previous lesson had two central pawns, and one of them was sacrificed to clear the space for the bishops behind it. And then the second pawn was advanced to create the space gain and open up the bishops while looking at opponent's bishop. So here, the situation is a little different. We're going to review two games with isolated pawn, this time a single pawn, where the pawn is sacrificed actually for slightly different reasons, but also somewhat the same too. The pawn is sacrificed to open up the files for the rooks and bishops, and generally speaking, the idea is similar. You've got pieces behind the pawn. The pieces need additional space. Rooks need additional files, bishops need diagonals. So you sacrifice the pawn, you allow the pieces to come out, and you basically launch a big attack. So apparently similar concept.
I peeked at this game. This is a really fun one to review. I don't know if it's the Spassky one or the other one, but really incredible stuff. One of my favorites to teach. And if I remember right, the legend is that Black quit chess after that. He left the tournament hall and then didn't come back. Have you heard of that?
That was Kurt Barleben. It was played in a Hastings tournament, and a Hastings tournament is 1895. It's actually one of the longest tradition in chess. I think it's been running for 100 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
It usually starts in December and ends in January. It is still being held in England. It's one of the probably oldest running chess tournaments. And Steinitz played Barleben in this tournament, and it was quite an event in itself. Lasker played in it, Steinitz played in it. The event was actually won by an American, Gary Pillsbury, not of Pillsbury cookies, but Pillsbury, I'm not sure if he's relative actually or not. He was actually 22 years old at the time, and his success in the tournament was absolutely stunning. He was ahead of Lasker and Steinitz, who were successive world chess champions, and he was ahead of Chigorin, who was a second place finisher, and they actually competed for the first place throughout the event. This was probably Gary's.
So you know a lot about the background of this game.
Yeah, so there's a lot behind the game. And the Barleben story goes like this. I read in some chess book, I don't remember, but the story goes like this. When Steinitz played Rook G7, we'll get to that point in the game. Barleben excused himself to the bathroom.
Yes, I knew it. I knew I had the game right.
He excused himself to the bathroom and basically never showed up.
Yeah.
Basically, really bad sportsmanship.
Yeah.
Bad job on that. But I think he was really upset that he was losing in such a spectacular fashion, because I think at one point he had an illusion that he was doing well, and then the game was a complete massacre. And it's actually one of the most beautiful games in chess, period, and one of the most beautiful games Steinitz ever played. So
his opponent didn't see it that way, though.
His opponent didn't see it like that. I don't think he actually quit chess, but he did quit that particular game.
Oh, gotcha.
And obviously was forfeited when he didn't show up after a while, but did not really go well in his resume. So Steinitz actually made him really upset, obviously. I want to go through the opening of this game without much review of it, because it's not really something that we're here for. We could take a look probably in Italian at some point or another, but in this game we're interested in basically the middle game concept. So a very sharp variation, actually.
Oh, let me adjust the sound on this, by the way. When the piece moves, it's kind of loud. You can just go like this. I have these little bars. It goes green, yellow, red. I just, yeah. Now you're all set. Go ahead.
So my strategy in the beginning was basically to get as much space as possible, get the pieces out as quickly as possible, and above all, retain opponent's king in the center. So he actually succeeded at that. And after bishop g5, probably I would guess queen d7 would result roughly in the same thing. But in the game, he actually played bishop e7, and bishop took on d5, and the knight took on d5. And then he actually succeeded in his goal. So this was basically the first moment where you can kind of see, okay, well, he's actually doing really well. And he's taken a second file here with this.
Whoa. We're going too fast, aren't we? We skipped over a lot of stuff, didn't we?
Yes, we did, but
Okay.
we're basically focusing on a pawn break in this game. Now, in this position here, White has set lots of pieces correctly, I think. But right about here was that moment where, in my opinion, maybe he did not appreciate what was coming, wasn't paying attention to that. And I think here he should have played king f7. I don't remember the exact detail of this. I haven't spent a tremendous amount of time analyzing this particular position. But I think this move would have prevented a lot of trouble that he was in later. It is always difficult for a player to volunteer for castling loss, but in this case, the most important thing is actually to install the knight on d5. When you install the knight on d5 in this position, you cure a lot of ills.
Make sure to use arrows. If you hold right click, people love arrows and circles and stuff.
Knight on d5 here, that's where you want to put this guy. That square covers a lot of ground. E7, C7, F4, C3, B4, E3. A lot of squares unavailable to white pieces immediately. Blocks check from C4, protects C7 pawn. It is really sort of like do-it-all move in a way. Instead, Barrleven played kind of a solid move, C6. He thought it was a solid move.
And what is he hoping for? How does he think he's eventually going to castle his king?
I don't think he necessarily even thought about castling just yet. He probably felt like, well, if I'm going to play king f7 on the next move, then put my knight on d5, and let's see what this guy has. His thinking was probably something like this. Let's say knight goes to h4, he plays king f7, queen check, he plays g6, and then what? White got all of that stuff lined up, but really basically get nothing out of it.
Right.
Queen can go to h6. Yes, seems like a good location, but what do you do with it? Probably something like knight d5, protecting e3 and c3 from the rooks. And then you kind of look at it. Okay, what do I do next? Not entirely obvious.
Black's holding this, yeah.
Black is holding this. In the meantime, you can probably do something like queen g4, queen g5, or for queen trade. So in this position here, I think Barrleven looked confident, and he thought that this was a good position. But Steinitz didn't play knight h4. Now, what White needs in this position, what White has, is two really strong pieces, queen and rook. But his other pieces, his rook on c3 and c1, he can go to c3, and his knight can go to h4. Those are not ideal. Let's say you go to c3, and then you put the rook up to e3. So it seems like you're attacking, but after knight d5, you realize that the attack is actually very short-lived.
Mm-hmm.
Now that knight on d5 really solidifies everything and guards everything. So he needs the rook and the knight to be in the game, but if you go to h4, you go to the corner from where you don't have much prospects. And if you go to c3 with king f7 and knight d5, again, you get nothing out of it. So what he's doing is he is opening up the space, the territory for both of these pieces by playing d5.
That's unthinkable. There's three pieces guarding that square.
That's true, but basically here you have this mate, so that's not an option. Knight can't really move. You could take with a pawn, that's just about the only thing. And realistically, probably this would have been his best response.
Still, yeah.
However, if you just take on c6, b takes c6, queen c4, now all the pieces that White has are involved in the attack. The knight can go to d4, attacking e6 square and c6 square. Both rooks are opened up. The king is clearly in the wrong place and a wrong time. So knight goes to d5, knight d4, and here he doesn't even have to trade. He can play rook d1, And after knight takes c6, the pawn falls, the d5 square becomes compromised, and the game is probably over. However, maybe he could have lasted a little bit longer if he played that way. Now, he probably didn't really feel like there was a tremendous amount of threat to him, so he took the pawn, and after knight d4, he simply played king f7. So he's continuing on his plan, and given another move or two, he'll probably play rook e8 or rook c8, threatening to trade a pair of rooks. And if he does succeed doing that, then he's going to be okay. So Stanis here needs to play very energetically. But the good news is all the pieces he has are very active, well placed. So he begins the invasion. That's what you usually need open files for. You need them to invade opponent's territory. So he's invading, and he's immediately creating a very serious threat of rook c7. Once the rook gets to c7, at that point, when the queen moves, knight g5 check, f takes g5, rook takes c7, and the king's fate is probably decided. So black played rook to c8, guarding c7 square.
And definitely quite a progression for that knight. You know, it goes to f3. That's usually its favorite starting square, and then d4 is an improvement. Now e6. You know, this is looking pretty terrific.
Yes, the knight has done a tremendous job and immediately attacked multiple squares in opponent's territory. And now Stanis begins the final approach, queen g4. And it's a checkmating threat. Queen takes g7 is in the picture here, followed up by a mate.
Game over. Easy peasy. I'll just go g6. What are you going to do?
That's right. And now the second and the most unpleasant story is that you actually have a discovery here. So Mr. Stanis introduces him to a cute check. So obviously this did not really look good to black. So he moves back. And now this is a classic overload situation, a piece overloaded with defenses of multiple objects. You got two attacks on c8, the rook c8 from c1 to c8, and then the queen x-rays c8 as well. So even though directly queen does not attack the square, it actually does. And black queen has to defend c8. So he's got a rook on a8 and a queen on d7 defending that square. At the same time, the queen is needed to defend the knight. So it's a classical overload tactic. Rook takes e7 check. But you can say, well, he doesn't have to take with the queen, does he? Because if he does, obviously he's going to lose c8. But taking on e7 is not really a great option because after queen b4 check, Mr. King now experiences a very, very difficult situation. So if you go to f8, to e8, I'm sorry, then rook e1 check.
Yeah, and I want to add that, you know, for viewers listening to this, it really is important to listen to these variations that you know, Orlev's outlining here, because black didn't just roll over and start making sloppy moves. I mean, black, I think, probably made the best moves from this point forward. I mean, after going pawn g6 right here, black is now playing the best moves. And so, you know, an important part of being a good attacker is understanding how your opponent should defend. And so, you know, that's why we're explaining this. You know, black is now forced, you know, to lose essentially.
Yes, and here this nice move with a check decides the game, because what do? If you go to, say, e8, there's a mate on f8 right there. Well, if you go to queen takes, rook takes, and rook c1, hoping for the checkmate on the back rank, well, the rook actually returns. So Mr. Bardelevin is having a bad day here. After queen b4, he has to more or less go to d6. Queen takes on b7. Queen defends again. And now we just continue to chase the king. Has to go to d8, knight f7, and then you have to give up the queen on f7 and you get checkmated. However, Mr. Bardelevin plays what appears to be a brilliant move. King f8. And I'm not sure, maybe he actually saw this and anticipated it up to this point, thinking that, well, what do you do? If you take on d7, here I am with my checkmate.
Yeah, we can't be having that.
Not fun. Same thing if your rook takes d7. And now what do? If you take on c8, that doesn't seem to make any difference because the back rank is still unprotected.
As are white's, all of white's pieces. Every piece is on pre right now.
Every single piece is under attack, but Mr. Steinitz introduces him to another check. And again, taking it with the queen results in the loss of the rook. Going to e8, you lose d7 with check, so you have to go to g8. Now Mr. Steinitz plays another check. You can't take with the king, taking with the queen once again, c8. He goes to h8. And the mad rook continues. Rook takes h7 check.
Mad rook? Is that like mad cow? What's this mad rook you speak of?
The wild rook just keeps giving itself up, and it cannot be taken. So you have to go king to g8 at this point. And now, what do? Well, another check on g7. Is he going for a draw? Well, no, he's not going for a draw. This is actually a decisive check that wins the game. Why? Because if you go to f8, suddenly the knight joins the attack. Knight h7 check, you have to take the rook, queen takes d7, and you lose all your pieces. But I can go to h8. Well, as far as I remember, legend says that here Mr. Bartolybin went to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Without playing king h8.
Yeah.
Right about here. Why did he go to the bathroom? Well, he was actually probably figuring out that this was not going to end well, and it's true. Because now the king and the knight and the rook will very nicely coordinate the attack. And no matter
really beautiful
where you
here.
go, you get really checkmated really soon. And now, checkmate in 3, queen f8 check. And now beautiful pin on e8 f8 checkmate.
Cool.
It's actually one of my favorite games. I think the first time I saw this game when I was either in the 6th grade or 7th grade, I was really excited. I played it over like 5 times.
I think me too, yeah.
Games on chess. It's just a lot of fun to see how energetic and precise white played in this game.
It's interesting. I have kind of a similar memory in middle school going over this and feeling really excited and trying to wrap my mind around all these rook moves, you know?
Yeah, what a wonderful victory. So,
yeah.
Bad sportsmanship by Mr. Bartolybin, but I'm not sure why he was upset, really. Maybe, he wasn't expected to win against Steinitz. Steinitz was a superior player, obviously, but maybe he just calculated up to the point where king went to f8 and was very excited about all these 4 pieces under attack, but he missed the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I can see how it'd be frustrated because it just seems like, you know, white's pieces were immortal, you know? It seems like this should be a dubious, you know, kind of game or something, but it's just a really magical one, honestly.
Yeah, it is actually a lot of fun. Very, very energetic game from the start to finish. Steinitz really did wonderful here. I think this variation refutes the d5 move early in the opening instead of knight takes e4. So you can see there, going back to that moment where he sacked the pawn, you can kind of see what the sack is for. You see 2 pieces actively attacking the knight, but the balance of the army is not actively involved. So what he's doing is essentially clearing the space for the rest of the crew. Now the rook has the c file and the knight has d4 square, and every single piece he has attacks the king, whereas on the other side you've got 2 rooks on sides that are absolutely not helping at all. Therefore, you've got attackers to defenders ratio of 2-to-1, which is bad news for the defense. Nice game. So the second game had a similar concept, and again, I'm not going to go through the opening in any serious detail. I'm just going to go through the middle game here. This was Queen's Gambit accepted, an unrelated opening whatsoever. And you can see that in chess, a lot of ideas are transposed. So what do we have here? Again, an isolated pawn from the queen-pawn opening, and a very large army of white pieces ready to go. Now, there are multiple places where they can go, but black is about to sort of like shut it down by playing knight to d5. Once he plays knight to d5, he blocks the bishop on d3. He does not let white rook participate in the attack. And d5 will be protected 4 times and attacked only twice. So it would be practically impossible to break through. So what Spassky did, and this game was played in 1949, when I think he was in his teens or early 20s, when he still wasn't a world champion, but he was always very good attacking player. And he noticed a very simple thing. The king is actually in the center. And going back to Steinitz, who was always very good at forming all kinds of postulates for chess and rules, he said that if you have an advantage in development, you must attack, or your development advantage disappears. So Spassky opens up the rook and keeps the energetic attack going. d5. After d takes e6 is played, the game is over, so you more or less have to take. And here is probably the move that his opponent did not anticipate, because he probably did see all of that. What he did not see is bishop g5. And now white is actually threatening to win a piece. How so? Let's say you play h6 attacking the bishop. Not a particularly great move, but just to show what the threat is. Bishop takes. What do? You can't take with the queen, you have to take with the pawn, but you still lose a piece all the same. Now you're simply overwhelmed by a number of attackers.
Right.
So he has to go, more or less has to go bishop e7. And now Spassky takes on f6. Very cool move. Once again, taking with the bishop is losing a piece. And taken with a knight loses the queen. So choices are you have to take on f6 with the pawn. Knight takes d5.
What was the decisive mistake here? I see that the white wins this in 21 moves. Where did it become like no longer salvageable?
It was early on in the game. He should have played c4 at some point, locking things up. Instead, he kind of took very bravely this open fight. And every time you take an open fight with the king in the center, you're basically asking for it. And that's essentially what happened. He's taken a fight in an open position versus large number of pieces. And actually, look at the rooks again. You see the similarity with the previous game?
I want to double check this. I've got Stockfish 11. Hold on. Let's see for a second. He's losing now. I want to know, where was the critical error? Okay, it says here you're +2. Okay, so it looks like you were right, because this is bad, and then this is worse. So it's those two moves. The combination of going here and then here. Move 10, no longer salvageable. Why again was that so critical? How did it dissolve so fast?
Well, now d5 becomes unstoppable. The problem is that after e takes d4, there's really no way to stop d5.
White's winning.
And since you're king in the center, you're basically under humongous attack. So what he should have done sometime earlier, I think, is to play c4. And after bishop c2, bishop e7. And this may not be an ideal position, but at least it's a playable position. There is no checkmate. You see white is up about a point. Still shows that white has the initiative. Rook d1 brings the rook to the center. Castles, e4. Yes, white does have the initiative, but you clearly see here the black actually castled. Therefore, the game is on.
And so kind of that simple principle about just when you're behind in development, don't let the opponent open up the board, right?
Absolutely. Keep the game closed and try to get out of the middle. Fighting on in an open position versus developed opponent usually leads to nice miniatures.
Yeah.
which is great for chess lessons, but not good for your psyche.
Yeah.
You just always feel terrible after being bombarded like this.
Yeah. All right.
So here,
I'm convinced. I'll turn off the engine. Please continue.
Mr. Spassky exercises pretty much the same concept as in the previous game. You look at this. The similarities here are enormous. There's no rook on e1, but you have the same pin against the bishop, and you got the queen and the king and the bishop, all of that. And here, knight to d4 threatens knight c6, threatens knight f5. And castling, unfortunately, is a touch late. How so? After knight f5, black is facing threat number 1, queen g4 and g7 mate. And threat number 2, his bishop is undefended. So you can't really defend both. So you kind of have to go here. And here, it sort of depends what white wants to do. I would simply take on e7, trade queens. Remember, when you're winning, don't try to be cute. All right, you're winning. Game is done. Don't screw it up. Trade queens, you're done. So here, you can see that things are pretty much wrapped up. So he has to play king f8. And knight goes to f5. And above other things, in addition to queen g4, there's also queen h5 and knight h6 possibility. And Mr. Avtonomov plays h5, tries to get his rook supporting the position. However, now you have again an overload of the queen. You got a queen guarding d5, and you got the queen guarding e7. In this situation, again, it's very simple. If you pull it one way, the second way remains unguarded. So rook takes d5, and the game is all but done. He played queen takes d5, queen takes e7, king g8, queen f6, and now he's facing two minor threats, queen g7 check and knight e7 check.
Beautiful. How about this? What if white says, I don't need to be so fancy. There's time. Let me make some space for my king just in case. Is he still winning this?
You know, I think the situation is really so bad that he would probably still be ahead. But after rook a7, this actually suddenly may become a contest.
Yeah.
Again, if you're not attacking and you're giving your opponent time to bring some defenders in, you suddenly can find yourself in a situation where you're going to have to battle hard to win.
Yeah, that precision factor really makes a difference here. You know, just dropping the ball for one move, and you know this game would not have necessarily ended this way.
Absolutely. So if we just kind of want to point out to everybody where things gone wrong, well, I'm personally not a big fan of this whole b5 idea. When I play this opening as black, I feel like my job here is to create an isolated pawn. I think that's an important part. But the second part is I should not forget about my king. Let's get out of here, gentlemen, and let's try to make sure that we don't get in a lot of trouble.
Certainly.
I want to see what the Stockfish thinks about this, but I think
But what I want to ask you,
what
I want to ask you about though is this idea of like a sharp position. You know, like if someone, you know, like a viewer or something is playing a game like this, how do they recognize a sharp position when they see one, and what does that mean, and how should they adjust their play and thinking in a sharp position? What does that mean?
In a sharp position. This is actually a lost position.
Yeah.
You've been sharp some time ago. Here it's just done.
Yeah.
Rook takes d5 and game is over.
Uh-huh.
I was actually thinking, like, why didn't he play queen c7? That was the only thing that you can think about. Well, why does he take on d5? That loses immediately. I don't think it would have been tremendously different, because after rook a d1, this position just does not seem survivable. Rook d7 on the next turn happens. And if you go rook d8, then knight takes e7.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that this game was so fast and it was so few moves that it's you know, kind of easy to kind of overlook just how well white played here. You know, it kind of seems like, you know, there was no real skill here, but there really was, you know, because you just played so accurately after seeing that window of opportunity and made the best move on every turn, you know.
Yes, indeed. And I think what Spassky did in this game is basically a classical opening in a position where you lead in development. Now, if you lead in development and your opponent is not castled, you must open the center. And if you give your opponent escape, it's going to be a different ball game, longer story, will take more time. You may still have a better game, but it's going to be a long game. Whereas here, except for the bishop, if you actually think about it, all other pieces are actually mobilized. So it makes a lot of sense to actually tie up the king in the center if you can. And this is clearly fairly obvious. Even if you don't see the rest of it, you can kind of see that here in this position, you are leading in this game and your opponent's castling is destroyed. Your knight will get to f5, will just have a wonderful position whether you checkmate or not. So the sacrifice in itself is just a single pawn. So he executed kind of a classical attack, went ahead in development. So it doesn't seem like it was a big mastership, but it's not true. You actually have to get into the position to be in such situations. So he played the opening very precisely, whereas his opponent played a sloppy game.
Right. Cool stuff. And I really like how these games were similar in that way. It was pawn d5 with the idea of like knight d4 and that kind of thing.
Yes, I think it's a great lesson in isolated pawn break. I think everybody's going to benefit. If you play against isolated pawn, you need to know these things. And you need to remember that even though it is isolated pawn, it can advance against you. So do not delay castling necessarily. Play the castle quickly.
Well, really enjoyed this. I think we'll probably call it a wrap there. And I know we're going to have a donation button in the video description below. And then what does that go towards?
The donation button goes towards support of the coaches here. The coaches are spending time and creating very interesting lessons for you guys. Hopefully you enjoy them.
Yeah. So appreciate you guys considering to do that. If you want to leave us a donation, we sure would appreciate it. But really, just such a joy doing these videos with you, and looking forward to doing more. What can we look forward to in the next video?
In the next video, we're going to look at this from the black side and try to find some positions where black exercise some pawn breaks. Not necessarily exactly the same pawn structures, but some ideas that also show that even if you play with black pieces, there are plenty of opportunities to exercise attack like this.
Cool. Very neat. All right, any other closing thoughts, or should we call it a wrap there?
Yeah, let's call it a day.
All right, sounds good. I'm going to stop the recording.
Bye, everybody.
And that is going to do it for today's video. If you like this one, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, loved ones, aliens, and everyone in between. I'm desperate. Please send it to people. I need more people to watch this. And, just click some more links. I got this drop-down menu on over this way. And if you click that, it expands, pow, 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 to some different videos. You have one with me and Yuri Orlov talking about central pawn structures, and then another one about pawn breakthroughs with some exciting games with Tal, actually. And then I've also got another video series I'm kicking off with non-YouTubers. And in this one here, I've got a video with this person named Dylan Oz. She's a fantastic human being, and I don't know that about her, honestly. She may be a crook, but from what I can tell, she seems okay. No, it's fun. She's a non-YouTuber, and so it's a new series I'm kicking off where I'm making videos with intermediate players who don't really have a chance to do YouTube videos. So you can check that out as well. Thank you so much, and play lots of chess, and I'll catch you later. Ciao.